All right then, let's look at some methods that the dictionary supports. As usual, we're going to look at a few methods that are used most commonly. There are additional methods that you can use with dictionaries, but they're not important to our exploration right now. Basically, these methods are different ways to get values or keys or both out of a dictionary. So why don't I use each one? Keys, values, items, and then we'll use get in just a second. In fact, in place of in between each one, rather, I'm going to call a print statement just so that we have a little more space. Okay, let's run these and see what we get. Okay, now, as you can see, we seem to be getting back the keys from the keys method. Dict keys, it said. Values, the values. We're getting back the values. And items, look closely at that. Now, I'll tell you about this whole function thing in a second, but look closely at that. What is that? What does that look like to you? Actually, this is our first taste of a multidimensional structure. This is a list of 2 item tuples. A list of 2 item tuples is a list of 3 tuples, and each one of the tuples has 2 items in it. So keys will get us back the keys, values will get us back the values, and items will get us back 2 item tuples. Each one of those contains 2 items, that is the key and the value for a given pair. These are different ways that we can work with these dictionaries. Now, these objects that we're seeing here are not actually lists, although they kind of look like they are. In fact, they are what we call iterators. An iterator is something that you can iterate over. So if I say for key in xdict keys, print each key, and then maybe exit out so I can have a little room here. As you can see, I get C, B, and A, and that doesn't really seem very different from when we just loop through the dictionary by itself. In fact, it really isn't. You're looping through the keys in the dictionary. If I change it to values, however, each item is now one of the values. So some folks want to know if they can just access all the values by themselves. Certainly, there's no problem with that. You can just use the values method. And the items method will allow us to see a single tuple pair in each iteration. So usually when we use keys, values, or items, we're expecting to loop through them. So that's one way to use them. If you really want to get a list of keys or a list of values, it's easy enough. You simply put the method in question inside the list constructor, and we can now see the list involved by printing it. So the reason values doesn't just return a list of values or keys return a list of keys is that they're more efficient when they're iterators. And if we wish to see a list of these keys or values, we simply pass them to the list constructor, which of course is also true of items. Any sort of function that will take an iterator or a list, like many of the summary functions we've seen, like sum and len, will work with these iterators. But the most common one is list, because sometimes if we really are interested in a list of values and we want to use a list of values as such, we can just call values on the dictionary and pass the result to list. One question that I sometimes have is what use is items? What can I do with items? Well, that's a slightly more advanced usage. You can, of course, loop through them. You can read values off of them. In fact, some people prefer to loop through a dictionary this way for key, value in xdict items. This is basically taking each key value pair and assigning it to variable names so that we can loop through the dictionary. This is actually a little bit more efficient and is also much easier to read than the subscript syntax. So if you like to loop through a dictionary this way, you're certainly welcome to, although I do want you to get at least a little familiar with subscript syntax. The one last method that I'd like to show you is get. Now, we don't use this very often at this level because I want you to get used to subscript syntax. But sometimes if you want to get a value from the dictionary and you would like to maybe put in a default value instead, if the dictionary key is not found, although let's talk about that in a minute, we can certainly do that using get. Get takes a dictionary key and gives back the value. In fact, it is almost identical, except in syntax, to xdict subscript C. Now, if you choose to use get every time when you're getting a value out, you can certainly do that. Again, I do want you to become familiar with subscript syntax so that you can use it, because you'll see it in a lot of code that other people write. But get is another way to get a value out of a dictionary based on a key.